To Mr. Doherty, who's the director of Caltrans. The reason for this letter is continued support for the Willits Bypass project. Despite 14 years of environmental studies and 6 years to obtain the necessary permits from resource agencies, the US 101 bypass of Willits remains a controversial project within a small segment of the local community. This letter is intended to remind you of the local need and commitment to the conclusion of this project. Since the first studies were underway, the Mendocino Council of Governments, the Willits City Councils, and the County Boards of Supervisors have each consistently endorsed the Willits Bypass. Additional backing has come from counties to the north. Furthermore, the California Transportation Commission unanimously supports the funding for this project. At this time, the public process for the Willits Bypass has concluded and the construction phase has begun. Please work with the appropriate agencies and take the necessary actions to allow the contractor and their employees to move forward without further delays and additional unnecessary costs to the taxpayers. This is copied to the California High Patrol, Charlie Fielder, Caltrans District 1 Director, Assemblyman Wes Chesbrough, Senator Noreen Evans, and Congressman Jaron Huffman.
My name is Judy Burtis. I'm an occupational therapist and a resident of Willits. I'm a photographer and a painter. I came here in 1990 from the bucolic area of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, full of big trees and canoeable rivers. And I want to talk about aesthetics and tourism, and I want to ask a question about my water well. Last Thursday, I was at mile marker 4939 at the north end of Willits at the 40-acre interchange area, photographing Thule elk that come down from the Brook Trail Sherwood Road area to graze on the fresh spring grass at the wetlands at the north end of the Little Lake Valley, which used to be actually a little lake. And what I wanted to talk about is the lack of wildlife corridors. They're going to be building the 6-mile bypass on 20-foot high earthen berms that they're taking from Oil Well Hill, piling up berms and putting the freeway on top of it, except for a mile of viaduct over Commercial Street and East Valley Street. So while I was out there photographing the Thule elk, there were deer skeletons laying near the road, and I asked one of the people I was with, "Eeks, what is that?" And they said that's a deer skeleton because all the deer come down here and they get hit because it's a little turn in the road 101 there, and they just leave the skeletons there. There's a lot of wildlife coming down from the hills to the wetlands. The wetlands feeds a lot of wildlife, a lot of birds, a lot of amphibians, and a lot of us spiritually. I'm a painter, I'm a photographer. I paint those old barns. I take pictures of those old trees in the snow. I want to urge you to consider 2 options. One is that there's an option for routing truck traffic around Willits by going down the railroad 150-foot corridor, which will accommodate a road and the railroad, and by connecting Railroad Avenue, Bechtel Road, and Shell Avenue as a through-town option for north-south traffic. We don't need a behemoth in our valley. It will ruin the aesthetics. And so I want to thank you for listening to me. There's a better way. It's not a done deal. There's still money that Caltrans needs to get for their mitigation to not build the project. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Judy.
I'm a resident of the Willits area for 42 years. As you must understand, this is a symbolic endorsement of the freeway project. And you don't have to agree to this monstrous destruction. You don't have to, because of some agreements you misunderstood in years past. The whole situation has changed now. It's always been a 4-lane freeway. They must have a 4-lane freeway. Now it's a 2-lane freeway. They said, we want to work with your little town. We love your little town. Where would you like to have it? We made a project showing that a 2-lane truck route would be perfectly adequate for 5,000 cars going through. They rejected that. We have to have a 4-lane freeway. Now they have a 2-lane freeway. You're not obligated when Caltrans lies to agree to having a project that is going to be so destructive. I would like to say that I object to the statement by Mr. Pinches, who's smiling, that a vocal minority is speaking out of turn when most people agree to the project. Most people do not agree to the project. 90% of the businesses don't want the project. Is that a vocal minority? Marge Hanley, who is a member of the CTC as a commissioner, said it's a total waste of money. It doesn't do anything. But Mr. Pinches doesn't say that Marge Hanley is a vocal minority because she has more money.
Thank you, Mr. Ray.
My name is Greg Connie. I live in Dos Rios, about 30 miles northeast of Willits. I did a Willits-Dos Rios commute 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year for nearly 20 years. I know Willits traffic. I know north of Willits traffic. I know a boondoggle when I see one. I know what a bridge to nowhere is, and a waste of tax dollars when I see that. I am opposed to the Caltrans bypass as currently designed, but you aren't voting on the bypass. You are voting on a letter of support stating virtual unanimous government endorsement of the project. In my point of view, this is disingenuous and misleading. By no means is endorsement unanimous. The mayor of Willits and the newest council person are on record opposing the bypass as currently designed. I served on the Willits Council from 2006 to 2010. I was then and still am opposed to the plan as currently designed. Had I not moved out of city limits and had served another term, the Willits City Council would actually have a majority opposed to the plan as currently designed. The letter you're being asked to support is superfluous and misleading. Ask yourself if this letter is true, is it kind, and is it necessary, and then reject it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Weller of Willits. And good morning,
Morning, Brian.
Chairman Hamburg, and supervisors, also, of course, our sheriff and most of Willits, I think. There are a lot of emotions around this issue, and I think certainly many of us, and there's well over 1,000, if not 1,400 local signatures to a petition to think again. We certainly oppose the bypass in its current form, but we all also propose that we rethink what a local solution or in-town solution might look like. We know from history that the past is no predictor of the future. Using past arguments to justify where we think we're going flies in the face of experience. So I would urge you to think again. I think what is being committed in our valley is legalized lawlessness. We shouldn't support that. Is it true? Well, it depends on your point of view. It's certainly true for Caltrans. They build big things. Is it true for us in our small community? I don't think so. So I would urge you to think again, to question this. It's never too late. And yes, work did begin last Thursday. And I think that's appalling. We have a young woman in a tree facing noise from a generator and a bright light throughout the night. Is this kind? Does this support the rebel heart of Mendocino County? I don't think so. There is a better way, and I urge you to think and feel with your heart what that might be. Thank you.
Members of the board, honorable citizens. I live 325 feet from where the current construction is going on. My wife is 8.5 months pregnant, and our baby is lying breech transverse right now. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter. I grew up in Willits. I work for the Mendocino County Railway. For the last 96 hours, my family has endured constant noise. The bulldozers and the chainsaws begin at 6 a.m. As soon as the sun goes down, the generators come on and the lights come on and flood into my backyard. I have witnessed the protocols and the surveys that were carefully done by SHN violated in sight of the California Fish and Game on video. All of these protocols are being violated, whether they have been obtained legally or not. They're now not being enforced. They're being violated. We, the people who live in this town, the people who are trying to raise our families in the peace that we have known, are being disturbed on a level heretofore never seen before in this county. For 96 hours now, my family has endured constant noise. I'm serious, John. Back in the 90s when you were first running for supervisor, I remember you telling the people of our town that you were going to protect the fish.
Sir, would you please address the chair and not individual members of the
Sorry.
board? Thank you.
It has been stated by the board that the fish and wildlife would be protected, that salmon would return to the streams. Habitat's being destroyed. My family is being terrorized. I work 6 days a week, and the 1 day a week that I get to rest, I don't get to. Citizens are being disturbed in their own homes on a level that is like torture. And the people in the trees yesterday had ropes thrown around their necks, and the tree cutters attempted to pull them out of the trees. I have been informed that this county ordinance of sound is 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., but I'm having to endure 24-hour-a-day noise. I've made complaints to the sheriff's department, and they cannot do anything about it because it's out of their jurisdiction. It's time that this project stops before everybody in this town becomes enraged.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Linnea Dew.
My name is Linnea Dew. I've lived in Laytonville since 2001, and I've seen how many people in Laytonville and Willits support our supervisor, and I voted for John Pinches myself. Most of the opposition to this bypass comes from the people of Laytonville and Willits. And to me, this bypass is truly ill-planned and unnecessary. I want to respond to one thing that you said, Supervisor Pinches, in your opening remarks, which is that there was nearly unanimous support in these meetings. I went to a number of meetings about the bypass, probably 1.5 to 2 years ago when there were public hearings. I found unanimous support against the bypass. There were a lot of environmental issues brought up. And frankly, I felt that after all the studies were made and it showed that a great majority of the traffic was going to brook trails and would not even be impacted by the bypass, that the whole thing was dead in the water. And so I think there were a lot of people like me who were really shocked when it suddenly started up again and when this money was found. To me, you've abandoned your own constituents. And that is just, I just feel this project is completely cynical and it's all about federal highway money and temporary jobs. It's a disaster to Little Lake Valley and to Willits itself, and it's going to create environmental and economic devastation. And you should be standing with the people who have supported you for decades.
I am speaking on behalf of the earth who cannot speak for herself. I am speaking from my heart. This planet is a living, breathing, intricate system that we are all privileged to be part of. She provides everything we need, but we have simply taken too much without giving enough back. She is sick. She is dying. How would we treat a human in this similar state? Would we disregard, harm, and exploit them in their darkest hour? Or would we lend our hands in a gesture of selfless love, service, and respect? Where is our compassion for Mother Earth? The stewards of this land would be horrified by what we have done. They respected the delicate web that bonds all living things together, the tree of life. The cutting of one branch affects every individual in the entire system because we are all interconnected, interwoven. We must look beyond the illusion of separation and realize that there is no I, only we. Now is the time for humanity to nurture this great tree instead of cutting it down and treating it like a lifeless resource to exploit. Now is time to be mindful and taking only what you need of its fruit, no more, no less. Every action that we make as a species must consider this truth. When you drop a stone into water, you create ripples on the surface that reach out, unknowingly affecting many lives, and those ripples eventually come back to you in time. The Willits Bypass is a microcosm of the ecological destruction taking place globally. If the bypass is constructed, it will essentially act as one more nail in our collective coffin. Other alternatives are available. We must consider these alternatives for the sake of the earth, ourselves, our children, and all living things linked together in the tree of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.
I just got up this morning and wrote this letter. I'm not presuming that your minds would think this way, but it's what came to me, and I feel it's important to say. This is a letter addressed to Malcolm Doherty, the Department of Transportation, and the California Transportation Commission. The Board of Supervisors of Mendocino County has had an epiphany. We have been misled by 20 years of rhetoric from opinions by various factions, but most of all, the California Department of Transportation, or Caltrans. We have been manipulated into thinking Willits had a severe traffic problem. This manipulation started when Caltrans restriped the road from Frank Howard Memorial Hospital to Highway 20, where once there was a minor slowdown of traffic, that created a bottleneck. This angered motorists and caused some pressure on us and Caltrans to fix the problem. There were the usual trucks and folks who thought it would be a good idea to get them off Main Street while fixing that restriping problem. Time went on. There were many great proposals by experts brought in by the community of Willits. Caltrans was supposed to study these alternatives and actually pretended to do so, but in the end rejected them all because they didn't meet, quote, their project objectives. And I'll get to that at the end of this. The Caltrans project objective was an outdated model of a passive 4-lane freeway bypass that had worked in other areas in the past. They settled on this, then rammed it down our throats, abetted by a misled Mendocino Council of Governments who committed $31 million of monies that were supposed to go into various infrastructures of the towns and cities around our county. Now here's the part that really frosts our collective banana. Caltrans couldn't get funded for their project because, unfortunately, their freeway footprint knifed through extremely sensitive wetlands and riparian habitat and made the previously unheard of